Shut up and sit down.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Fight for Liberty show. Today we have a wonderful guest, Thomas Quiter. He is running for New York State Senate in the 52nd District. So, hello, Tom. Thank you for coming on to the show.
I hate to be the guy to correct you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Quiter.
My apologies.
Yeah, it stems from Old French, and it can translate into too free.
All right. Quiter. I apologize.
It's okay.
So I usually like to start off every interview with just asking you your kind of political testimony, how you came to have the ideology that you have currently.
Well, I never ascribed to either of the two major parties, Democrats or Republicans, because, well, they're Democrats and Republicans. And when I say Democrats and Republicans, I don't mean voters. I mean the politicians and the political structure.
Right.
We do a bad job of making the differentiation there sometimes. I actually like Democrats and Republicans as long as they're not politicians. And actually, in my efforts for the campaign, I've met some politicians on both sides that I do like, that I can work with. And that's interesting and slightly elating that if I do win, I'm not going to walk in there alone. I'm going to have people already on my side, people who are seated, other people who are running, people who are influential, they're listening to me, and they're on board with my message. And we have a conservative politician who's dropping money on our campaign ads, and we have a lot of Democrats who are supporting me through messaging and sharing and just general support. That's been amazing to find out, and it really really hammers home an experience I had in March when four little libertarians, Tim O'Connor, Jake Cornell, Keith Price, and myself, we went to Albany in a carpool situation to submit our petitions because we had a cooperative petition effort. And when I got there, we had the social distancing thing going on, right? And they were only calling two of us up at a time to submit our petitions. So the lobby filled pretty quickly. We had between 30 and 40 people in there at all times. And I was talking to another politician's campaign manager. And being a disability advocate, which is how I truly found the Libertarian Party, that's what I was talking about. I was talking about the problems with our systems, the waste in our systems, like the fact that I have to prove 16 times a year that I can't walk, and that's on the taxpayer dime. I've never been able to walk, and I'll never be able to walk, and it should be pretty cut and dry. Let's not waste money on that.
Right.
And as I talked to this guy, I noticed other people were paying attention. Some people turned their heads, some people gathered around, and it got to the point where security kicked us out for not social distancing because everyone wanted to listen. and that was Democrats, Republicans, Greens, WFP, conservative, you name it. That was everybody. And that was pretty cool. That was an awesome experience to have such a wide range of political ideologies listening to me and paying attention. They wanted to listen. They overheard, and they decided they wanted to pay attention. And I think that's what I really bring to this race is that no matter who I talk to, I have the issues that everybody cares about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're running in a two-way race against a disenfranchised rhino Republican. You really are the people's candidate in that race, and it seems like people are realizing that you guys are doing very strongly.
Yeah, our outreach numbers are great. Our door knocking numbers are great. We're getting more more people when we door knock that support me than him, and that's Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. Um, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And that is one thing though that I've learned. Politics takes money, and I'm a frugal guy, right? If I spend more than $5 on an article of clothing or a meal, I'm kind of mad at myself, and so that's really hard to get over. I think a lot of libertarians are like that, but you know, sometimes you have to spend money to make progress.
That's true. Unfortunately, it's extremely true in the American political realm.
Yeah, absolutely. And the real unfortunate thing about politicking, particularly when we're talking about the two big parties, is that they're not spending money to be heard or to talk to you or to listen to you. They're spending money to showboat.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes our politics system more like the NFL than politics. And I think that's part of the reason we get so much vitriol in these two party conversations. That's another thing that I like to address typically and as often as I can. Whenever you have two opposing forces, particularly that are political, you will see people get heated. You will see people get angry and they call each other names or do this or do that. And I'm an anti-vitriol person. I force them to listen and have a conversation as much as I can. It's about the only force I like to wield is to make people calm down and discuss things. And you know, it, it's very important. We need to have these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have these discussions, then what the hell are we doing?
Right. Politics needs to be about how we're helping other people, how we're expanding liberty, how we're shrinking government overreach, not about what we've done or how what winning this is going to help our careers or our lives.
Or who we're standing next to. We see the two parties do this all the time. Look at me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm standing next to this presidential candidate. Look at me, I'm standing next to that congressional candidate. It's like, big deal, you're standing next to him. So what? What have you done?
Right. And usually it's nothing if all they're doing is standing next to candidates or celebrities.
I mean, I'll let the other two parties kiss hands and shake babies. That's not my style.
Yeah, doing something is definitely what we need. Um, which actually kind of brings me to my first question. I know that your district has a pretty substantial urban population, but it's also a lot of farmland. Um, so I'm curious what I know that you have a pretty solid stance on how you want to help farmers in your district, and I would love to hear that.
Well, there are a lot of ways that we could help farmers in district. And population wise, we have a solid urban county. There are four counties in the district, and I think it's between two-thirds and three-quarter of the land is actually agricultural, that much of it's not really being used, or at least not being used appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
We see the state funneling subsidy money to large farms that produce unhealthy products that pay low wages to their workers and require fewer workers. How does that help the district if we're employing fewer people and producing a product that's A, not as healthy, B, brings in less retail value, and C, is shipped out everywhere? I mean, in this COVID situation, we had this period of time, and sometimes some people are still upset about it or worried about it, of potential food shortages. Now, if we're let's take this from a security standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not producing food that we can consume, then where's the food security there?
Right.
And I mean that's ridiculous. I mean, if you think about extreme circumstances, right? Let's say we ended up in battle, in war, or whatever have you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what would we do when our food systems that are shipping everything all over everywhere, and we're only focused on a few products locally? What happens?
Mm-hmm.
And big dairy is something that I really have something personal against. Um, It's unhealthy. I mean, I saw the lieutenant governor release a statement with an article about how they're so proud of how they figured out how to let milk sit warm for 6 weeks. Would
You're
you
not
knowingly?
supposed to let milk sit warm for 6 weeks.
What do you think they have to do to it to make it not spoil after 6 weeks? And once they've done that, what's the difference in it? A lot of people don't realize that pasteurization actually changes the protein molecule,
Hmm.
and that's why we see higher rates of our intolerance to dairy and other products. Um, if we were, gee, producing raw milk locally in a free market, where
That's
the
illegal.
right, it's not illegal, but it's also expensive to get the permit and the equipment and everything. It's very, very controlled. In a negative way. I grew up drinking raw milk, and when I say raw milk, I don't mean milk that was pasteurized with UV light or filtered or homogenized. No, it came out of the cow. It went to the chilling tank. We dipped it and we drank it, and we could do that safely for most of my childhood because we understood that the animals it came from were healthy.
Hmm.
And, small farming practices produce healthier, happier animals. And healthier, happier animals produce healthier, tastier products. Um, and the same for plants.
Hmm.
And, we have this system of tax breaks for farms, right? Property tax breaks for farmland. Now, if so much of our district or so much of our state is farmland, why do we need to have a system that taxes and offers a tax break? Can't we just lower those taxes?
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Well, it actually costs money to take advantage of those tax breaks.
Hmm.
So you have to spend money to save money. And, you know, um, someone that I've been working with, Doreen Barker, she's a small farmer and she's fighting a good fight to keep her farm going. She has many other jobs just to support her farm. She doesn't actually make a profit on her farm. Um, and that's wrong. How many jobs should you have to run a small farm?
Just the one.
Well,
Like,
and that's another thing. That's another thing people don't realize. Farming is not simple. It's not
oh,
easy. It's very complex. You have to know your soil. You have to know your grazing land, meaning the plants that your animals are eating. You have to know the health of the animal. You have to know the housing structure and their needs to be happy.
hmm.
And we have this issue where, in order to sell retail, meat from an animal has to be USDA inspected. Now, here's an interesting thing. We actually have other facilities that are not USDA inspected, but are held to the same exact standards by local, county, and state rules, right? So the only difference between being able to use a local butcher and one that's USDA regulated is how much money they pay the government. I believe
Sounds
that
fair.
our state should have the ability and the right to say to the federal government that we have our own rules. They're better than yours. They're cheaper. We don't want to hurt our small farms. I think that's pretty simple.
Yeah, I like that. So, I mean, that's something that really needs to have happen, but that's too simple for the two-party system. So I'm curious, what's your plan for when you win? You get to Albany. I know you talked that you have friends there already, but what's your plan being the only libertarian in the state senate?
Well, as you're aware, I have quite the policy team for the campaign. And one thing you get to do when you do win a race is seat people in your office, appoint office positions. And I do not intend to take full credit for this campaign. I am a candidate, and I will be the face and the voice. But to sit here and tell you that I can do everything all on my own would be ridiculous. Nobody can.
Right.
So I have a solid team. I have a solid policy. And when we get to Albany, we will be talking to everyone we can to, for one thing, a lot of these situations, these seated legislators, they just don't understand how it actually works from the other end.
Hmm.
Um, so we'll be educating and we'll be discussing, and of course we'll be making proposals every chance we get. I intend to sponsor, write, co-sponsor everything I can that brings us to more liberty, specifically for our farms and our economy. I mean, this COVID situation has shown us just how vulnerable our economy is.
Hmm.
And if you look at the resources we have, farming and keeping our food system local would be a good buffer to all of that.
For sure. Every localization is the best way to go in almost every industry, every branch of government, every problem gets solved by localization because nobody wants to screw over their neighbor, their actual like next door neighbor. But people in New York can say fuck Texas all they want or California. That's easy to say. And when it's just team sports at a federal level, that's all we'll get.
Well, unfortunately, I won't have a whole lot of effect on the federal level, although there is a potential to support ending or to support instating term limits, which I did sign a pledge to do. State legislatures, if that movement grows strong, will have some power for voting in that. But beyond that, what I can do is focus on our state and local rules and try to convince our legislature that it is not only good, but it is our duty to define the feds when it's going to harm our constituents. I mean, the states are there to protect us from the federal government. The federal government is there to protect us from foreign governments. That's literally the way it's supposed to work. That's how we
Hmm.
were founded. And beyond that, our counties are there to protect us from state governments and our municipalities from the county. Um, we need to recognize that as municipalities, counties, and states, we have not only that ability and that right, but we have that duty to our constituents. We are here to protect them. That's why elected officials are public servants.
Amen. That is the biggest qualifying factor for me when I'm deciding whether or not I want to vote for somebody. I say a lot. Are you a representative or are you a ruler? Do you
And
represent the people or do you tell them what to do and try to control their lives?
and what we see happen is politicians will come in trying to say they're not a politician and they're not there to rule you. And my opponent actually did this, and then it's the opposite. They end up these golden calf syndrome icons. People worship them and don't seem to pay attention to their voting records or what they've done and haven't done, or any other faux pas that they've created that really need to be paid attention to. And there's a lot of that with almost every long-term incumbent.
Hmm.
That's ridiculous. I mean, why are we continuing to support people who abuse us?
I would love to know the answer to that question. I I wonder often how so many people can still bow down to the two-party system. And I'm not even talking about the people that like reluctantly vote. I'm talking about there are so many people that actually full like to the depths of their soul believe that Donald Trump is a good person and a good president or that Joe Biden is a good person and would make a good president. And it'll never make sense to me. There's people across the entire country that think Andrew Cuomo is an amazing person and want him to run for president. Like anyone
Well,
from New York will tell you different.
from a disability advocacy standpoint, I can tell you that Andrew Cuomo has been killing the disabled for his entire tenure through policy. What would you say to an individual who killed a disabled individual? And then think about that. Apply that to somebody who creates policy that kills them in mass.
Mm-hmm.
How can we justify that?
You can't, but team sports will always be able to justify war crimes.
I guess.
It's how team sports, man. That's how politics works. And people, it'll take a while, I think, for people to fully wake up. But I think, I've been talking about your campaign constantly, basically, like since you announced, because you have probably, or at least in my personal opinion, the most winnable libertarian race in the country this year. I mean, your opponent
Yeah,
is
I
not
mean
great.
that's very true. A lot of that is because of the incumbent I'm running against and the fact that he's otherwise unchallenged. There's only two of us, and he's made a lot of mistakes, and his voting record is garbage. Um, I,
Yeah, I think this is the year that people finally start to wake up to that. And
well, and we're seeing that in the streets, right? All of these protests and the like. I mean, there's a lot of different arguments over this and over that, and the thing that I hate most is people arguing for an increase in police power, which is something my opponent actually proposed. They all failed, thankfully, but he proposed much of that right after the 50-A was repealed in New York, which took away the qualified immunity in the state.
mhm.
So now, the same people who are screaming about Cuomo and their Second Amendment rights are saying, let's give Cuomo's army of police more power because they'll never come to take our guns under orders.
Because they don't understand how real life works. They didn't read any of the hundreds of articles that have come out since red flag laws really became a thing, of people getting shot, innocent people getting shot in their homes purely over their guns. It's a
Yeah, what
thing that
was
has
that in Maryland?
happened.
Someone got raided in Maryland. They shot his pregnant girlfriend.
Mhm. Yeah.
How can we justify that? To that note,
But Blue Lives Matter, man. Like,
yeah, well, to that note, um, I come from a culture where we were poor. We ate game because for the price of a bullet and your permit, you got 50 pounds of healthy red meat. All right. A lot of this district is rural and poor. When they increase the fees on owning a weapon like this, which is for whatever purpose, they also increase that on people's ability to utilize a vastly available and necessary to control because we removed the predators resource for food and anything else we could use, let alone home defense, right? I mean, you've seen, obviously, I'm in a wheelchair, right? What people don't realize is that when you're in a situation like mine and you're around the wrong people or the wrong person is walking by, victim is tattooed right across your forehead.
mhm.
Easy pickings. You see this in any animal in North America, including humans, that go after the weakest first. And, we always hear people calling guns the great equalizer. And you know what? They are. They are. This is just an AR-15, fires literally a 22 round. It's got a little bit more powder behind the round. But what makes this legal in New York is this tiny little pin right here. It holds the magazine so it can't be removable. And you have to break it down and load it through here so that you can't just swap clips. That's the only thing that it takes to make the adjustable stock, pistol grip, and the flash suppressor. It's not a noise suppressor, it's a flash suppressor. Legal.
Hmm.
One little pin, it's smaller than a pencil. But I went through a gun shop. I was originally looking for a 223 long rifle, but they were all too heavy for me because of my disability. Too heavy, too long. The stock was too long. You have to be able to hold it properly or you shouldn't use it.
Right.
And they actually pointed me to the AR-15 and a proper build. So people don't know that. People think all AR-15s in New York are illegal. And I do not agree with suppressing our right to bear arms in any way for any reason. However, the point here is, how ridiculous are those laws? I mean, people think that the big bad government stepped up and said you can't have AR-15s, they're dangerous. No. All they said is you have to put a little pin in it. And people are giving them all this credit for stopping the bad guys who don't exist.
Right. They just don't. All you're doing is screwing over innocent people. That's it.
Right. And, you know, in New York City, you can't own one of those, but that's a localized situation. Right?
Gotta love the 5 boroughs, man.
I don't agree with it, but local rules, I get it. However, what this really comes down to is, again, it's showboating. What rules did they make? You have to have a pin in there, big deal. I could still put 10 rounds in that. Semi-automatic.
Mm-hmm.
How many rounds do you need?
Should only need 1.
Well, I mean, my mother
2.
was
You got a
captain of the
warning
rifle team
shot.
in high school. Yeah, my mother was captain of the rifle team in high school, and these mass shooters that we see, who are people with social problems that I would argue are largely created by our government oppression, and other psych issues that go unaddressed because of social stigmas, again, because of what the government has done, and so they don't get the help they need. That's at least my take as a disability advocate. I'm very familiar with psych issues and social ostracization and what that does to people's behavior. When we do that, it's bad. But I've always stated my mother is far more deadly with a 7-shot 22 than any of these mass shooters. I mean, you hear about how many rounds they fired and 2 people died. It's like, well, that guy sucked. Don't want to send him to war for me.
I mean,
but it's insane.
It's true. That's why so many mass shootings have been stopped by armed bystanders, because they know what they're doing, unlike the random 22-year-old kid that just decided that his life wasn't worth living unless he robbed the liquor store.
Right. And, you know, that's also usually desperation over drug addiction, which is arguably proliferated by the war on drugs, because that makes it profitable. It makes the cartels or drug runners bring it in more because it's got a bigger price tag. I mean, when you need money, you sell things that are worth more. However, largely, these issues are far more complex than they're portrayed. And what people, I think, need to remember is to turn off that TV. We have this two-sided media news cycle, 24 hours, you know, Fox News, MSNBC, whatever you want to talk about, right? And they're all purporting different sides, and they're all yelling at each other, and they're all, you know, going so gung-ho and heavy. And we're creating these situations where people are not living life as much, not getting out and doing things, and they're sitting in their homes and they're watching that news cycle. Yep. I've seen it happen to people over and over again. And now I don't want to say that the news shouldn't be doing what it's doing, whatever, but I think as politicians and as constituents, we have a responsibility to recognize that vitriol, hate, finger pointing is bad. Doesn't help. The discussion helps.
Right. Well, I'm excited to see that discussion be able to take place a little bit more. I think New York State is moving in the right direction. I mean, a chunk of your district is Broome County, correct?
Yep.
Where we currently have a sitting Big L Libertarian district attorney that won last year. So, you know, we've proven viability at this point, at least to some degree. And I think, we're moving in the right direction. State Senate this year only gets us that much closer to Larry Sharp in the governor's mansion, right?
Absolutely. There is some interesting dynamics here. According to the left, according to the right, I just don't want to look at the labels. I want to talk to people. I mean, most people have the same initiatives, right? They want to be housed, warmed, fed, and have enough time to not go insane after work.
Yeah. That is the average person. But too many people play up their lives to try to be more than it is, and politicians have no idea what a normal life like that looks like.
No, they're overhandled, they're over controlled, they're over divisive, right?
Mm-hmm.
We live in a country where most people barely even recognize that we have more than two parties. And that's really not what we're here for. That's not what this country was founded for.
No. Our first president talked quite extensively about it multiple times.
And he didn't even want to be president.
Probably my favorite thing about Washington. He never wanted the job. Served 2 terms anyway, and then resigned when he didn't have to.
Yep. And now we see, not at the presidency, but Congress and other state level positions, we see people holding on to these positions for 4, 6, 8, 12 terms. And, the interesting thing here is, times change. Did you know that last year isn't exactly like this year? Kind of an amazing concept, right?
Yeah.
The 90s aren't like 2020. And when we have people stay in power with the same beliefs and the same diatribe for too long, then we're not moving with the times, and we're not adapting to the different situation that comes with a timeline.
Yeah, I feel like most politicians were good people when they ran for the first time. But I feel like there's a switch that happens roughly like 2 years into you being an elected official where you just kind of forget what it's like to not be in office. And then you're just a whole different person.
I'll never forget. I broke too many bones. I went cold and hungry too much. Never forget that.
I mean, there's definitely people who can still hang on to that, but I feel like as a majority, people just, it seems like even the people that were brought up, in poorer homes or, in rural kind of conservative areas they just leave all of that behind them, and just conform to the two-party system, if they belong to the two-party system, that is.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty self-evident in the way they behave. I mean, our Washington politicians are catered with lobster and steak all the time, while fighting over how much money to or to not use to help people when they took that money from those same people. I mean, it's just so asinine. And
Yeah.
whatever progress we can make, and to that note, something that is, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I am a disability advocate. You know that. The waste in those systems is incredible.
Yeah.
And as a disability advocate, I work with nonprofits. I'm on the board of one, but I work with others. I talk to social workers and healthcare workers across the state, and you would you would be surprised how often I hear the rules aren't letting us help this person. Do you have a workaround? How do we get this guy or this girl what they need? I mean, can you imagine being in a severe suffering situation and being told that despite all of the touted welfare and health care, which is now kind of welfare systems, could you be can you imagine being told you can't have it and you're just supposed to suffer?
Mm. No.
And at the same time, you're going through a ridiculous amount of extraneous, expensive procedures, appointments, um, processes, paperwork
Mhm.
that don't do you any good.
No, I wouldn't. I couldn't imagine that. That's ridiculous. I think that's one of the main reasons why I've warmed up to the idea of like UBI when Andrew Yang first was popular, was because in his original plan, he was talking about like gutting the welfare system, just all of that bureaucracy, all the rules, all the gatekeeping, all the bullshit. Just get rid of it, and everyone gets $1,000. And I'm like, all right, sure, that's that's better than having to jump through 87 hoops like a fucking dolphin.
Well, when it comes to disability systems, I mean that is something we can do appropriately. I don't know about
Yeah.
everybody, but everybody need, right? Um, for instance, to keep your SSI, you're not allowed to work to make money. Have you had a job before?
Mm-hmm.
And then did you have a second job after that?
Yeah.
That first job probably wasn't that great, and that second job, you put that first job in your resume, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea or the concept here is that your resume builds and you're able to get better jobs or get promotions or build your expertise, right?
Right.
Now, if you're not allowed to work because you're on SSI, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, you're stuck there forever.
Right. What goes on your resume? um,
I was number one in Call of Duty for 4 days. Like that's
right.
about like
Right. Um, and we need to recognize that maybe not everyone, but there should be a qualifying group, people like myself, people like others that I work with who are suffering the most under these systems.
Mhm.
There should be some kind of easy opt out situation where instead of spending all that money to make sure they're still disabled when we know they're never not going to be disabled, maybe we should just give them that money and allow them to work as well. Do you think
That'd be
maybe that
great.
would be more helpful than wasting extraneous taxpayer dollars on not helping people?
Mhm. And making sure that you're not getting help that you don't deserve.
Right. And actually, one of the things that I hear most often from social workers is that they believe a lot of these systems are only designed to keep people off or to kick people off because of all the hoops you have to jump through. I mean, I like to tell people this state mails me a giant redwood worth of paperwork every year, and you have to go through these
Not
systems.
surprised.
Right. And one of my social workers drives, well, until the COVID situation when they finally moved to remote work, drove 90 minutes both ways once a month to sit down, ask me if everything is okay, and mark it on a piece of paper, and then go back. So she's getting
Jesus.
paid. Um, her travel is getting reimbursed. There's brick and mortar costs, right? Because there's a business involved. And then there's all of the processing of that paperwork to the state systems.
Mhm.
The universal assessment system is the literal New York State system that lost my legs. Um, yep, I had to go through the
I'm
universal
sorry, run
assessment.
that back real quick.
Yes, New York State lost my legs. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I had to go through what's called the universal assessment system to get a disability aid when I was in a much more suffering situation. My father had just died. I went through a health slump. My wheelchair wasn't
Mm.
working well, and that because my wheelchair wasn't working well and all of those other things, I needed some more help, and so I did apply and I did get it, but in the process, somehow New York State had me listed as having feet but no legs, and the ability to drive without assistive technology.
Feet but no legs.
And the ability to drive without assistive technology, all in the same sentence. Yeah, right. Think about that. Picture it in your mind. I mean, are my toes 4 feet long? And despite Andrew Cuomo and his minions, my legs have always been firmly attached to my body since they formed in the womb. I knew they were there. And I went through several different social workers over the course of 4 years. The ability to drive thing got knocked out pretty quick, but it took me 4 years to convince New York State that I actually had legs. Can you imagine this? Yeah, a system to help someone who's in a disability situation took 4 years to convince them that my legs exist. Do you know how much paperwork and man hours that took?
All on taxpayer dollars.
Right. And that seems kind of silly, right? We're laughing about it. But the UAS is so long and so detailed. If that same kind of mistake had been made in a different situation with a different person's disability in a more crucial manner, it could kill people. That could kill people.
Yeah. Government has a lot more power than they should. Let's put it that way. We need to make sure that we're reining that in.
This COVID situation has just made it worse. I was at a protest in Binghamton a month or so ago, and I am a disability advocate. I can't put it down. While we're standing around and waiting to get started, there's a gentleman in a wheelchair, obviously homeless. And so I had the conversation with him. You know what happened? He went in for spine surgery where they actually removed like half of his spine, work on it, and put it back. And he was in a rehabilitation situation after that. And, he was supposed to go from there to like a halfway house or a homeless shelter. But because of the COVID-19 situation, they said, nope, you're out in the street. He showed me a scar. If you've ever seen spine surgery scars, they kind of give you nightmares. Yeah, it's bad.
I'm going to have to Google that after this, though.
Or don't if you're faint of heart. And, I mean, think about that. Think about that. He worked, he was an older gentleman, and he had been a hardworking gentleman that came from a poor family. We had a long conversation. He had abuse in his childhood. He had other problems, but he was hardworking, and he aged, and he had a problem, and he had it worked on, and the government just decided, not going to help you anymore. Go live on the street. And I'm aware of another instance where a gentleman's hospital bed, and he's in his late 80s, broke. And if you're in a severe disability situation, right, that's something you kind of really need is just a comfortable place to sleep. That's one of the most important things, is to be comfortable at that point.
Yeah.
And so the system failed, right? It was just a hiccup in the system. They failed to replace that beforehand. And then the COVID situation, the lockdown situation happened, and they weren't able to. And then the social worker that I was talking to about that, she found 4 brand new, voluntarily offered, free hospital beds for him to take his pick of. You know what happened?
What?
State rules said she couldn't give it to him.
Why? Why do these rules exist?
Then they might be liable, right?
Maybe if they didn't do shitty things, they wouldn't have to be so worried about getting sued.
You think? And the interesting part there is that what's the point? What's the point of the liability regulations in that situation? Late 80s, and it's a hospital bed that's brand new. What's the point?
Yeah.
Why do we have to stop people from getting help? And you know that's very near and dear to me because, as most people know, the wheelchair I'm sitting in right now is crowdfunded
Yeah.
By libertarians.
Fuck yeah.
I ended up in a situation where I was applying for the same exact wheelchair I had, 5 times prior, and they said no. You can only have one of these that will injure you after a few months of sitting in it and put you to the bed, because everybody likes to live out a couple of decades in a bed, right? I mean that's good for your health, right?
Yeah.
Um, that so everybody knows the story. I was trying to repair this one, and in looking for parts, I found the one I'm in, and a couple libertarians convinced me to let them crowdfund it.
That's fantastic. I loved watching that happen. Just getting to see a community that was built for the sole purpose of politics get to help somebody in something completely not political. It's just great because, I think especially for libertarians, we get really wrapped up in politics and we don't have conversations with people that aren't about politics. And, it's great when we're able to kind of branch out and help people still and prove that, you don't need to be forced to help people. Just help people.
And if our communities were left more of their resources to their own devices, neighbors would help each other more. That's
Right.
something else I'm seeing through this COVID situation. With everybody being laid off and not having enough resources, they're not able to help as much. They're not able to help each other, those who are disadvantaged. And I continuously want to remind people that societies, including our own, go down in history as being known for how they treated the most disadvantaged members of their society.
Yep. And it's
We
not going to go
really,
down well.
right, and we do not have a legacy in how well we treated our senators and presidents and Congress and all that. That's not going to be our legacy.
Mm-mm.
How well we treat these players at the top, that will never be our legacy. And I think the most important thing to seek is financial liberty from our government, who is taking so much out of our communities.
Mm-hmm. I could not have said it better myself. Um, so I want to give you a little bit of time here at the end to just, elevator pitch your campaign and give out, a shout out to anybody and then, social media and website and how to get involved.
Well, of course, you can find me on Facebook, um, Thomas Daniel Queter for New York State Senate. Um, Tom for 52.com, TOMFOR 52.com. The website will recently or soon be going through transition. So if it doesn't work for you, come back in a few days. However, we really need donations. If you support giving power back to our communities and our individuals and giving the resources that are arguably theirs to keep and use as they see fit back to the individual so that they can be more responsible than our government obviously is, vote for Tom if you're in District 52. Give somebody else a chance. If you want to keep your Second Amendment rights, and if you want to help people instead of harm people over the drug addiction issues we're seeing, over the disability issues we're seeing, over the small farmer issues we're seeing, if you want to lower taxes so that you don't have to actually pay money to get the tax breaks that exist, if they even exist for you, here I am. Give me a shot. I'm here to help. I care
All
about
right.
nothing else.
I love it. That is the best elevator pitch I've ever heard. I mean, who doesn't want to vote for just a better life and a better government?
Well, I have a very large family. Um, I have a brother who has 3 daughters, plus a stepdaughter. I have a lot of cousins. Um, a large portion of my family is in this district, in this area, and in this state. A lot of people that I grew up with are still in this state, and they're
Mhm.
all people who have helped me, and that's why I'm doing this. Whether they're family or neighbors or just people I've known for a few minutes that have helped me, that's why I'm here, because the state systems have never helped me. None of them.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully we can get the government out of our way so that we can actually start to help each other finally.
And if you look around, we always do. We always help each other. People who have a little bit left after what they need will help someone that's near them, whether it's a family member or a neighbor. Um,
Right.
let's make sure they have a little bit more left after what they need.
Yeah, that would be great. Then we can all be better people. But I want to thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with me. I know you gotta go call some people, which is the best part about campaigning, right?
Yeah, I'm making calls between 8 and 10 tonight, I think. And I want to thank you for having me on your show. Um,
My pleasure. It was great to get to know your platform and your beliefs a little bit better, and I look forward to. I should be down in your district towards the end to help you finish out. Is the current goal? So I'm excited to see what you do.
I really appreciate that. And folks, and remember, unfortunately, this is New York State. You do have to vote with your dollars. Consider a donation.
Hmm. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Fight for Liberty show.